When we think about the Trudeau Liberals' mismanagement, immigration comes to mind. The Canadian immigration system is currently in disarray, with a target set at record height of 500,000 new immigrants per year. This figure doesn't even account for illegal immigration still occurring along our borders, international students, and foreign workers, bringing the total to over 1 million per year. Canada is feeling the strain of massive immigration on our infrastructure and housing. On November 1st, 2023, Immigration Minister Mark Miller stated, "If we don't bring more immigrants to Canada, the country will collapse."
If we don't welcome more newcomers, that number will approach 2 to 1 in the decades ahead, and that'll put our infrastructure and key programs like our healthcare and our education at risk.
Just 6 months later, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau acknowledged that the number of temporary foreign workers coming to Canada has increased at a rate far beyond what Canada has been able to absorb.
It's really important to understand the context around immigration. Every year we bring in about 450, now close to 500,000 permanent residents a year. And that is part of the necessary growth of Canada. It benefits our citizens, our communities, it benefits our economy. These are the levels that we have stabilized and grown steadily over the past years, because that's what Canada needs to continue to have a strong economy and strong communities. However, over the past few years, we've seen a massive spike in temporary immigration, whether it's temporary foreign workers or whether it's international students in particular, that have grown at a rate far beyond what Canada has been able to absorb.
Mismanagement, incompetence, or lack of communication between them, or perhaps all of the above? This is what we will be discussing with Tom Kimmix, the Shadow Cabinet Minister for Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada.
This is just a continuation of the public battle that they've had since August, when the Prime Minister reshuffled his cabinet. So he's on his 5th or 6th immigration minister. So as soon as it happened, the former immigration minister and the current immigration minister started to fight publicly. One said that the immigration system was out of control, and then the other one said that it was a mess. And now you have the Prime Minister weighing in, claiming that, he just noticed that he broke the immigration system, and claiming that he's just kind of this independent party. He just, these are partner agencies, that he's not responsible for breaking the department and, allowing, well over 1 million new temporary residents to come to Canada. This was all under his watch. So he broke the immigration system. He's the one that's been appointing all of the immigration ministers. He bears final responsibility for it. Nobody wants to be responsible. Nobody wants to be responsible for destroying the consensus on that immigration is a good thing for Canada. Nobody wants to be responsible for the massive backlogs at the immigration department, like the incompetence, the inability to get anything done. They've made lots of announcements. Most of those have never panned out. There's never been any results from it. And the international student announcement is a perfect example, where they're forced into capping temporarily the number of international students coming to Canada, but they're the ones that raised it to over 1 million. It was about 350,000 under Stephen Harper when the Conservatives were last in power in 2015, and they let the system get out of control. So to claim now that they just noticed it, that they think it's terrible, and that they're kind of, oh shucks, we didn't know this was going on. No, that's not acceptable. They were in charge. They are responsible. They need to be held to account, and we're going to hold them accountable for having broken the immigration system.
Proof this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost is that he picked the most incompetent immigration minister in Canadian history and put him in charge of housing. The guy who lost track of 1 million people.
Regarding the illegal immigrants who once crossed over Roxham Road and who are now adapting to new routes, such as airport and other land paths, due to changes in the Safe Third Country Agreement. How will the Conservative Party deal with this?
So we've already done two things. For years, we've been calling for the additional protocol on the Safe Third Country Agreement to be signed, and they did. The Liberals for many years accused Conservatives of discriminating against immigration and against immigrants and newcomers and of like all types of like awful things. And we see at the border, in last year, when they actually revealed the signing of the agreement during President Biden's visit to Canada, they basically announced that the agreement had been signed a year prior, and they closed the border. Chaumet-Roxham was completely closed, and so it went from thousands and thousands of people crossing illegally into Canada to just under 100 per month now. So that way of coming into Canada is now closed. It could be done. When Conservatives called for it years before, the Liberals kept claiming that it couldn't be done. And the second part is under Conservative pressure, both from our leader and Pierre Paulus, who is one of the Quebec MPs, he's also a lieutenant for Quebec, we called for the visas to be reimposed on Mexican nationals coming to Canada. So these are passport holders. In 2016, the Trudeau government basically removed the visa requirement from Mexico. That's been reimposed. So back then, about 250 people from Mexico were landing in Canada and claiming asylum at the border. I think last year was nearing 40,000 people were making that claim. That's closed off now. You can't do that anymore. So it's just simple. Just if you manage the system logically, rationally, and reasonably, you don't raise expectations of people. There are many, many legal ways to come to Canada, and it's not as if we're calling for those to be blocked. There are very reasonable ways to come to Canada. You can come and work here. You can come and study here. You can come here as a visitor as well, but you have to apply for a legal permit to do that. And that's what we require, a bunch of documentation to be provided to prove who you are. Very reasonable things to be demanding. The Immigration Refugee Board now has over 150,000 backlogged claims, which is a huge amount of work they have to put in to try and verify the identity, the causes of persecution, and confirm that that's actually all going on. And this is, again, they broke the immigration system. They didn't need to make any of these decisions. There are very reasonable Harper-era rules that are put into place, like the requirement for Mexico nationals to apply for a visa. And it's still one of the number one countries where people coming to Canada is still Mexico. Like, there's lots of travelers who come here to work here, to study here, and also to be tourists to Canada. Very reasonable rule. A visa imposition was required, and they did it a few weeks ago because Conservatives called for it.
Many Canadians are concerned about the increased rate of immigration. Will a Conservative government commit to decrease the rate if needed?
So the 500,000 target is for permanent residents. That will come into force next year, the 500,000. It's 485,000 for this current year. That number does include all refugees. So privately sponsored refugees and government-assisted refugees are all included in that number. Our number, it will be much more encompassing. We're going to include temporary resident visas and permanent resident visas, because that number, that 500,000, half of those people are already in the country. They're just changing their status from a temporary resident visa, either a study permit, a work permit, or they get protected person status, which means they get eventually permanent residency. Those are all included in it. Half those people already in the country. Our number will be healthcare plus housing plus jobs will equal a number. So if you want more immigration, build more housing, more healthcare services, and ensure there are more jobs available for people to work and make a living and pay taxes and contribute to our society. So that's how we're going to do it. But first, we need to get into government to know how bad is the situation currently. And what we need to see is we need to see all the internal numbers of the department, because I can't get access to the numbers. They refuse to give them to me about how they set their targets and whether they're actually setting targets. So that's something that the Liberals have now said they will do in the next immigration plan this year in November. They're going to provide a temporary resident target for the first time forever, really, because they broke the immigration system. I doubt that they will be able to actually meet their target, because every target they've ever set, whether it's for climate change, or environment, for housing construction, for those deficits that they said were only going to be $10 billion, but are like over $40 billion. I don't trust them when they present any number anymore, but our number will be everything altogether, not just permanent residents.
If we want to protect our language, our nation, our identity, our culture, we need to have the powers regarding immigration.
Recently, Trudeau rejected Quebec ask for total powers on immigration. How will the Conservative Party ensure that Quebec can preserve its French language through immigrations?
So, I mean, I speak as an Albertan, so I don't pretend to tell Quebecers how to do things or the Premier of Quebec what should be his priorities. I grew up in Montreal, so I have a great affinity for the South Shore, especially Brossard, where I grew up in Canada. But on immigration, like Quebec already controls a great deal of its own immigration system. We're always going to partner and work with the Premier of Quebec. That it's a highly valued relationship with all premiers. I know my Premier as well in Alberta has asked for more control over immigration. We will work with the provinces to ensure that immigration works for them as well. One of the best things about Canada is that a province like Quebec can set its own targets, can manage its own immigration system, and all other provinces have provincial nominee programs. The first one was started in Manitoba a long time ago in the 1990s, and it works extremely well in meeting their goals. But we could do a lot more. Only about just over 75,000 immigrants are selected through provincial nominee programs. There's a lot of opportunities to do more through those programs and allow the provinces to be involved more in the selection process.
Don't forget to go over rebelfieldreports.com to encourage our independent journalism. You can donate what you can, and as I repeat all the time, every donation counts. We don't receive a penny from the Liberals. Of course, anyway, they will not give any of us. So go over rebelfieldreports.com right now and donate. Thanks.